was do law, you filthy animals. In today's episode of Shit or Lit, we are taking a closer fucking look at Saryn. A very close fucking look, so pay attention. Early apologies for the lengthy video. Saryn has a few things going for her, and I feel like the noobs deserve to know them, to get the most out of their toxic gameplay experience. Please forgive me and don't hit me. Saryn is a very solid warframe, and fascinating DPS is her expertise. Your job as a Saryn is mainly focused around dealing massive damage over time to the enemy, or providing certain buffs to your allies, if you choose to do so. Let's cover her abilities. First ability, Spores. This ability is the bread and butter of your kit. Casting this ability on an enemy infects it, spawning 3 spores, and dealing damage over time. You can spread these spores by either popping them, or killing their host. The longer you can maintain the infection, the more damage the infected enemies will take. This scales over time. If you fail to keep up the infection on at least one enemy, the damage will start to decay. Second ability, Mold. Saryn leaves a decoy behind her to draw fire from the enemies. Casting this ability grants you a short movement speed buff. Great ability to get away from shitty situations. Third ability, Toxic Clash. When this ability is casted, your attacks deal additional toxin damage, and this damage is doubled when using melee. While this ability is active, you instantly burst spores when attacking infected enemies. Fourth ability, Miasma. Casting this ability will apply viral damage to enemies in range. This ability is very strong, and can nuke enemies pretty easily on its own. Casting Miasma will double the damage over time effect on spores, on enemies that are infected. That's why I like to call this ability, the Flush. Now, let's get to some gameplay advice. When building your Saryn, you want to focus on range, power strength, then duration, and last efficiency. I'm running my Saryn on only 55% efficiency, because she has a large energy pool, and hardly has any energy problems either. When using your abilities, you want to focus using the first and the fourth. Like I mentioned before, you want to keep at least one enemy infected, but you can easily infect everyone in the area, if you focused your build on range, which you probably should do. Playing Saryn is quite simple when you get your head wrapped around it. Cast your first ability, pop the spores with a ranged weapon or melee. Now you should have multiple enemies infected. You want to keep as many enemies infected as possible, so you constantly want to be looking for enemies that are not under the effect of spores. If they don't get infected from other enemies, you should recast your first ability to continue the plague from another direction. You don't need to spam spores, you want to find that sweet spot by casting it on unaffected enemies every once in a while. Use Toxic Clash to make spreading spores easier, and deal bonus damage with your attacks. Use Mold to grant some headspace in the middle of the heat. Now, if you use your fourth ability as intended, enemies start to get beefy and you want to flush them all out. Casting 4 will double the spore damage, even if the infected enemies are out of Miasma's range. Meaning that it doesn't matter how far the enemy is, the damage will still be doubled no matter what. Using Miasma will most likely make the infected numbers drop at an alarming rate. This is where you want to try to work extra hard to infect more and more enemies to keep that nice spore damage stacked. If the damage begins to decay, don't panic. You can still save some of the process by infecting an enemy during the decay period. Saryn's most useful augments are Regenerative Mold and Venom Dose. Mold Augment will make you regenerate health when Mold is casted. Venom Dose lets you cast your first ability on allies, granting them a strong boost of corrosive damage to all attacks. Is Saryn shit or lit? Absolutely lit. She is really strong and high up in the DPS meta right now, and she is totally worth getting.